Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode of another slow and immersive playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3. In this playthrough, we'll be playing as a Githyanki Eldritch Knight who gets abducted by mind flayers but breaks free from his captive pod when his kin assault the Nautiloid. During his escape, he meets a fellow Githyanki warrior, Lae'zel, and together they embark on an epic quest to rid themselves of the tadpole, preventing any Githyanki's worst nightmare, which is to turn into a geik, and redeeming themselves in front of all of their kin and their Lich Queen Vlaakith for getting captured in the first place. Throughout this playthrough, we will be focusing on exploring the world of Faerûn through the eyes of the Githyanki, meaning we will be heavily favoring the Githyanki dialogue options and generally role-playing their typical aggressive and xenophobic attitude and approach to other races and the world of Faerûn at large. We will also be focusing heavily on Lae'zel's character, including her personal questline and relationship with the main character, who himself will have a very similar mindset and attitude to Lae'zel, which is also typical of the Githyanki in general. But that is not to say that he will not have some personality of his own, as we'll see when we go to character creation. Now, through this series, we will see the two forming a very strong bond based on kinship, pragmatism, a common goal to get both of them rid of the tadpole, and a steadily growing personal attraction. Now, with the intro out of the way, let me just make a quick note that there won't be any gameplay in this first episode. In the rest of this video, I will talk a little bit more about the setup for the series, and then we'll go into a detailed character creation piece, including a quick overview of some high-level Githyanki lore. Actual gameplay will start in episode 2, where I will also provide a short summary of everything discussed in this video. Now, back to a few points I want to make on the setup. Now, as some of you will know, I normally hate companions in CRPGs with a very burning passion. This is mostly because I abhor the idea of this motley crew of misfits stumbling their way through saving the world, constantly bickering at each other and tugging the party in different directions. I don't know why all RPGs seem to be in love with that idea, but I personally hate it. I much prefer a small, cohesive party that aren't presented as heroes necessarily, but are rather competent characters. Not overpowered, but competent. Most likely they're warriors, and they're largely pursuing a deeply personal quest, although commonly finding themselves at the center of world events that are kind of bigger than them, and that they have to participate in and resolve. But really, ultimately for personal goals. I feel like that's much more immersive, at least for me, much more believable, and it also means, I like to make the game challenging. To make these characters look like they're real, they're not haven't suddenly been overpowered, and ready to take on the world when just a day ago they were level 1 nobodies. On top of that, I also hate doing multiple companion quests, as I get lost in them, and I think they stop feeling personal when you have 3 other party members that all have custom quests. In the future, I might perhaps do more immersive playthroughs based on a duo. But for now, we'll focus on the Githyanki. Given Lae'zel is the cover girl, the poster child of Baldur's Gate 3, and I think the Githyanki have some very interesting dialogue lines, quest lines, and sort of overall theme. Now, also for those of you who are familiar with this channel, will know that I have about 250 hours in BG3 so far, but I have barely really scratched the surface of the game. For reference, I have never completed Act 1, nor have I ever leveled the character past level 5. The furthest we ever got to is in our ongoing playthrough together with Michael from Gaming for Immersion, and that is 2 Halfling Rogues. We made it to Grimforge so far, and we're just about to hit level 6. So, aside from the first map, the rest of this playthrough is likely to be blind, and it also depends though how far we get with Michael. But having played BG3 for a bit now, I'm fairly confident that Honor Mode can be beaten in an immersive way with 2 well-designed characters, and so I thought this would be an interesting experiment. Hopefully, playing as only 2 characters will keep this challenging throughout the playthrough, even as we level up. While playing as the Githyanki will put a new twist on the storyline that some may not have seen before. When BG3 was released, I remember Larian made a post a couple of weeks after, maybe a month, showing that the most and least played races and the Githyanki were actually at the very bottom. So hopefully, that remains the case, and people find this interesting to watch. Maybe there's something they haven't seen. Now, I personally myself hated the Githyanki race when BG3 first came out, and I hated Lae'zel as a character. Now, this is mainly because I had no idea who the Githyanki were. I didn't know any of the lore. I actually, funnily enough, thought Larian invented this specifically for BG3, because I've never heard of any astral plane sort of alien race, and I just thought it was kind of lame. I mean, it shows how much I know about D&D. I've never played real D&D, but I assume many people are probably in that boat though, which is why, again, I think they will find this playthrough interesting. But on top of that, I will actually provide quite a bit of, I mean, it's a high-level overview of Githyanki lore, just so you actually understand who the Githyanki are, where they've come from, and actually, you know, researching that for this playthrough, I actually understood what that opening cinematic actually refers to, and you know, like it kind of helps you just settle you into the game and just kind of understand, okay, you know, what's actually going on, because I honestly had no idea up to yesterday. Now, in terms of the format of the series, we are going to be playing on auto mode, of course, and we will not explode or cheese the game in any way. As always, this means we won't be anticipating key events or battles. We will not be intentionally avoiding, you know, ambushes or disadvantageous battles. We won't be using or stacking barrels. We won't be buffing ourselves prematurely. We won't be mindlessly running ahead to grab specific gear, you know, etc., etc. All of that. That's not immersive, and that's not what this is for. We'll be playing through the entire game as if we were a full party, but we'll only be two characters, our main character and Lae'zel. You get the drift, basically. Now, we will play through the game's narrative as it was designed, and if we get ourselves killed for acting like true Githyanki, you know, then so be it. So be it. You know, we might, you know, our tongues, our sharp tongues, and our general mindset of being superior to everyone might land us into trouble, but so be it. This is what makes it interesting, and, you know, I will die as many times as I have to in honor mode before I complete the game, so that when I do complete it, you know, the satisfaction I'll feel will be, yeah. I mean, I'll be very satisfied, is what I'm trying to say. And, you know, and I like savoring this game. I've played it for a year, and, you know, I love it. I absolutely love it. And, you know, I have so much more to see. I haven't seen any guides. I don't know any of the story. I have no idea what actually happens past the first map, pretty much. Now, of course, we will also not be stupid about this, right? So we will avoid going into legendary fights prematurely, or when, you know, after first map. I actually don't know which enemies are legendary, but, you know, we'll gauge that, and obviously we will try to, you know, sidestep that. This especially applies to the first map, you know, while we are at lower levels, right? We will also use the element of surprise wherever possible. You know, I don't think Githyanki as true warriors are above that. I think they know the key and the advantage of surprise and how decisive it can be in combat. So we will set up ambushes ourselves when we are outnumbered or dealing with especially powerful enemies. You know, both our character and Lae'zel realize that, you know, there are two Githyanki kind of lost in this world of Faerun, so they have to be smart about this. Now, what will also be... What I will try to do, however, that will be also slightly different about this series, is that because everyone has seen the first map probably 1,000 times by now, played it through themselves and watched it on this channel and, you know, many other channels, there's, you know, lots of good playthroughs around. What I'm going to do is, for the first map, I will focus on kind of key events, dialogues, and combats, while leaving most of the looting out of the game, right? I will make a summary of everything that happened in between episodes, which will mostly be a report of, you know, what I looted, what key items I found, whether I sold or bought anything at the vendors. And I think this will kind of speed things up a little bit and keep a good pace for the series, you know, just to get it going. It will all save us all a bit of time of me just kind of clicking around through various boxes, and keep people's engagement high, and, you know, hopefully get us through the first map. You know, I'm hoping about 8 to 10 episodes or so. You know, and then the game will really open up for both you guys and for me, right? Finally, in terms of the schedule, I will be posting this series on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, so that it does not clash with our other series with Michael that I already mentioned from the Gaming for Immersion channel, where we're playing through the game also in honor mode, but blind, and so for the first time for both of us, as two halfling rogues. But that will be ongoing. You know, that's we're both into it. I will not stop unless we die. But I thought, you know, it's cool to do a single player playthrough as well. It's quite different. This is all about melee characters. It's something else I wanted to try, which I haven't done a lot of. You know, I've only previously leveled a sorcerer, I think, to level 5. And who else was it? Can't remember. Maybe a ranger. But it was really like the sorcerer and I think the warlock maybe. To like level 4. Yeah, a couple of those. But sorcerer was really my main single player playthrough. Also, I did ranger gloomstalker on this channel actually. Level 4. Anyway though, before we begin, if you're intrigued by this setup and you want to see the series continue, well, it will continue regardless, but I guess hit that like button if you can to help spread the first episode, get more people on board, and yeah, I mean, let me know down in the comments what you think, whether, you know, there's any specific twists, and I will try to put in some twists in terms of character creation, you'll see in a second, and in terms of how we develop characters and how we go through the game, but very much trying to keep it, you know, thematically Githyanki. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into a new game. We will, of course, go honor mode, the only mode really, and let's break my monologue up with a little bit of a cinematic that I will never get tired of either. And that will make a lot more sense now after I go over the lore, as I never knew who the Mind Flayers were or who the Githyanki were in the game. Anyway. Now, who are we? Let's get into it. Now, first of all, we're obviously going to be Githyanki. Now, very quickly, I'm going to go through the appearance first. I've obviously pre-made the character, so we'll be very quick about this. We'll be a male Githyanki, of course.
What was that?
7. We will be... we're a little bit older character, you know. We've seen a little bit older than Lae'zel, so kind of mature. Baldur warrior, you know, a few scars on our face. We've been around. We've certainly seen our fair share of battles. Let's change the hair, first of all, very quickly. Now, Githyanki typically, from my research, have black, sort of, or brown kind of hair. So we're going to go with black. Obviously, highlights. Remove the ridiculous red highlights. But we'll have a little bit of graying, since, like I said, we are a little bit older, but just a little bit. We're sort of, you know, mature. A mature man, but not necessarily, in fact, I'm going to go with 30. But not old, you know, just older than Lae'zel. I'm going to go with a little bit of facial hair as well. In terms of makeup, we have nothing. Lip tint will just be slightly purple. And I kind of think thematically we're, you know, you'll see, we'll be an Eldritch Knight, so we're kind of a little bit magical, a little bit macabre, is how I'd put this guy. In terms of our eyes, we're going to have slightly unusual, kind of white eyes. I think that's pretty cool. So this guy is kind of, you know, he has a little bit of personality, a little bit of individuality. He's a bit of kind of, you know, I don't know, maybe it's the use of magic that made his kind of lips a bit purple, maybe his eyes a bit kind of gray, because, you know, he's Eldritch Knight is a sort of warrior slash magician, and we'll kind of roleplay it as sort of psionic magic mostly. Now, back to the Githyanki. Now, first of all, I'm going to change our class to fighter straight away, just so we look like a fighter here. And yeah, let's start off here with the race. Obviously, we're gonna go with the Githyanki. I think it is immersive and kind of narratively coherent that another Githyanki got captured together with Lysel, right? Clearly that Nautiloid was going through some world that where Githyanki were present, maybe, you know, through astral plane or, you know, material plane, which I will explain a little bit what those even are. But, you know, he captured Lysel somehow, so therefore there must have been other Githyanki in the area. You know, they don't know each other before they meet on the Nautiloid. But we'll pretend, you know, it's you know, our man here also had the unfortune of being enslaved, well, or captured at least so far, by his immortal enemy, the Mind Flayers. Now, who are the Githyanki? As I mentioned, you know, I used to hate this race, but once you actually get into their lore, they're really cool, I think. Now, the Githyanki here in BG3, I just described as, with a ruthlessness born from Mind Flayer enslavement, Githyanki ride the astral sea atop red dragons, bringing their silver swords and psionic might to bear against any trace of the illithid menace. So they ride red dragons, they have silver swords and psionic might, so they're sort of super well-trained warriors, kind of wielding mostly, I guess, swords, but generally I think they're kind of proficient with lots of different weapons. They also use kind of a little bit of magic, telekinesis, kind of psionic energy. So, you know, to me, like, once I've read about it, I think it's a little bit like Jedi. I don't know who took the idea from whom, but they definitely have some resemblance to that, I feel. So sort of like a D&D space Jedi, right? Now, Mind Flayer is their worst enemy. And again, I think that fits perfectly for this playthrough, given we obviously have Mind Flayers and the Tadpole as the main, you know, antagonist, so to speak, or, you know, the crux of the plot, at least, or the initial plot. And so, yeah, I think really a perfect race. I really fell in love with them after I started doing the research. Now, let's go over a little bit of history. I'm just going to read it out. It's from the Forgotten Realms fandom wiki. But here's some history of the Githyanki. The origin of the Gith race before their enslavement was largely unknown. Not even the original name of the race was remembered, but it was referred to by some as the Forerunners. Some sources claim that they were originally humans from a world called Faragos. In all accounts, the Forerunners had at some point become slaves of the Illithids, a race devoted to mentally dominating sentient humanoids to work as the backbone of their vast empire, and were transformed through selective breeding and genetic experiments for several millennia. Right, so the Mind Flayers, i.e. Illithids, i.e. Geik in Gith language, those are, you know, the guys infecting everyone with tadpoles, making these people hatch into new Mind Flayers. And they feed themselves on human brains, and they've been around for millennia. They used to dominate the galaxy, but when the Gith broke free, they were only one of the sentient races they've enslaved, but the Gith later broke free. So let's read on about that. After eventually developing mental resistance to their masters' mind control, i.e. the Illithids, the slaves, i.e. the Githyanki, revolted. Led by a female warrior named Gith, the several rebellious factions united, thus causing the fall of the Illithid Empire. And this happened kind of many eons ago. Not satisfied with regaining their freedom, however, and splintering the Illithid's empire, Gith advocated for a campaign of total annihilation of the Mind Flayers and the subsequent destruction of any race that could potentially enslave them again. However, a faction within their society, that is the Githyanki society, fostered peace, arguing that their race, the Gith, should focus on rebuilding their own society in seclusion instead of persisting in a tyrannical conflict. Kind of they, you know, themselves becoming a type of, you know, sort of like this Mind Flayers, in a sense that they would be the scourge on the galaxy that would enslave and murder everyone, you know, as a sort of preemptive strike and sort of prevent anyone else from ever enslaving the Gith again. Now, led by Zerthmon, the splinter faction started undermining the Githyanki's war efforts. After a long and bitter civil war, Zerthmon was killed, and the Githyanki moved to the astral plane, which is a sort of type of space realm in D&D, as far as I understand. This is because they thought that they would be safest there, because they had to expend, I guess, quite a lot of energy in the civil war fighting the other faction led by Zerthmon. And they also allowed the Nautiloids to kind of escape and fortify themselves in a kind of few underground strongholds around all sorts of realms. So they didn't really have the power to make that decisive blow and destroy the Illithids completely. And that is what they're angry at the other faction for, because they never let them kind of finish off the Illithids. Now the defeated faction, who called themselves the Githzerai, retreated to Limbo, which is a sort of chaos realm. Now, the reason Githyanki are called the Githyanki is because apparently Githyanki means children of Gith, whereas Githzerai, I guess, means kind of like, not the children of Gith, but like Gith of Zerai, of the Zerthimon faction. That's what I understood. Right, hence this is where the name Githyanki comes from. Now, in the aftermath of the Civil War, the once slave race had been splintered into the Githyanki and the Githzerai, the latter of whom were hated by the Githyanki because of their betrayal. Because their betrayal allowed surviving Illithids to retreat to isolated subterranean strongholds. Yep, as I've already mentioned. The two races then began pursuing their separate agendas, but they grew a deep hatred of each other and were at war ever since. And now the Githyanki are mostly represented by kind of warriors and psychic sort of like kind of attacks and mind kind of bending, whereas the Githzerai are much more kind of calm, collected, more like kind of monks. They're predominantly monks, I would say, sort of, so kind of, I guess, mind and body kind of fusion. That's the Githzerai. Githyanki are more like take a sword in your hand and be aggressive. That's kind of thematic difference, which, I'm already thinking sort of it would be a really cool playthrough if you go Githyanki monk. What you're really playing is not the Githyanki, but a Githzerai. But again, that's for another time. Now, years after their exile, self-imposed exile, I guess, in the astral plane, during the continuing war with the Illithids, Gith's advisor, Vlaakith I, suggested that she search for allies in the outer planes, in particular from Tiamat. Tiamat is apparently a dragon god of greed. It is sort of the evil dragon. Now Gith, this is the female warrior leader, right, who united the Gith and destroyed, and led the rebellion against the Illithids. Gith agreed to visit the Nine Hells for an audience, but never returned. Instead, the Red Dragon envoy Ephalomon returned with a pledge from Tiamat that all Red Dragons would be allies to the Githyanki and that a small contingent of Red Dragons would serve them as steeds. The envoy also decreed that Vlaakith I and her descendants would rule the Githyanki in Gith's stead. Vlaakith I also played a crucial role in securing the Githyanki's position in the astral plane. Ephalomon remained Vlaakith's consort ever since. Now, this is really interesting. So, it's sort of the rest of the story is kind of mired in mystery. Why did Vlaakith make this suggestion to Gith? Did she just usurp power effectively this way? Because the legend still kind of goes on that Gith will come back, and so the Githyanki are waiting for this kind of prophecy to be fulfilled and for Gith to come back and continue to lead them. So in theory, Vlaakith is only a sort of like a vice president, if you want, right? Sort of like a second in command, but she's been. It's not actually she has been there. We'll talk about that in a second. There's been many Vlaakiths, the Lich Queens, so there was a succession. So we're currently on something like 157th Vlaakith, right? So that became a sort of a title, and the most powerful Githyanki, I guess, rose to that top. But the 157th one actually kind of almost achieved immortality, apparently. But let's read about that. The latest descendant of the Vlaakith bloodline is Vlaakith 157th, the Lich Queen, who had no heirs. She was the first of her line to follow the path of lichdom, feeding off the souls of her most powerful knights. She also secretly aspired to ascend to godhood by capturing the spark of divinity from the One in the Void. She was supported by a small sect of sycophants known as the Cry. After approximately 1,000 years of repeatedly casting wish spells for that purpose, she believed to be close to her goal. But some Kraknir foresaw that the deity would instead awaken and destroy Tunarath, which is the Githyanki main city. We'll read about that. So then Vlaakith kind of devised all sorts of methods to basically persist and stay alive. But it's kind of unclear whether she's a good character or she has usurped throne and sort of betrayed Gith by sending her on this sort of one-way mission. So I think that's enough of the history. Now let's read about just their society. just to understand a few things. Hang on. Yeah, so here, kind of the ecology. Githyanki were similar to humans in many superficial respects, but generations of experimentation at the hands of mind flayers, as well as prolonged exposure to the astral plane, generated noticeable differences in their physiology, in addition to their innate psionic abilities. As a result of spending long periods of time without consuming food in the astral plane, their digestive systems had atrophied. For that reason, whenever they were outside of the astral plane, Githyanki required frequent meals, often rich in meat. In addition, they found the gravity of prime material worlds uncomfortable. Githyanki reproduce by laying eggs. It is unknown whether this trait had been acquired during their period of enslavement or as a result of exposure to the astral plane. And another thing about the astral plane, given it's a sort of like a special space place, time does not flow there. And time is completely stopped, and that's why they don't age slower. It's just that they try to spend most of their time in the astral plane so that they don't age at all, because otherwise they're a little bit like humans. They live a little bit longer as far as I understand, but not that much longer. But because they're in the astral plane where time simply does not flow, effectively they're sort of this little time capsule, they can actually persist for a long time in human years. You know what I mean? Now we'll talk, and this is kind of leads interesting into kind of a little paragraph on their family and parenting. Now, since it is impossible to age while in the astral plane, Githyanki need to hatch their eggs and raise their young in other planes of existence until they reach maturity. This difficulty added to Githyanki's extremely long lifespan while in the astral led to a very low birth rate, right? So this difficulty in taking these eggs to the material plane together with their extremely long lifespan while in the astral, and that's why they don't want to leave the astral plane. They don't want to go to prime worlds, prime material worlds. They have very low birth rate. Their favorite locations to raise and train young Githyanki were hidden creches located in remote places of the prime material planes. Their caretakers, known as Varsh, are responsible for hatching the eggs and collectively raising the young. The length of an egg stay in the material plane was timed carefully, or is generally timed carefully, so that all eggs in a clutch hatch simultaneously. And there are no families in the Githyanki society. Pretty cool, pretty interesting. From a very young age, Githyanki go through a rigid regime of training and combat practice, with increasingly higher expectations and more severe punishments, all the while hearing tales of Lakith and her immortal warriors. Fights to the death during training are not uncommon. Finally, at the conclusion of a young Githyanki's training, the last test is to slay a mind slayer and bring its head to Lakith in Tunarath, which is their main city. This rite of passage marks the Githyanki's entry into adulthood and into the community. Pretty cool. Now, as a people, also Githyanki are generally proud and xenophobic, right? And this is exactly what we will roleplay, right? We're not any special Githyanki. Our main character is very similar in spirit, as I already mentioned, to Lae'zel. Hence why they formed this strong bond, born out of pragmatism, a common goal, and, some growing personal attraction too. They're not devoid of that. They just don't form families, apparently. So they're very proud, very xenophobic. They're both master swordsmen or master fighters, and so they feel superior to everyone in Faerun. They view all other races with contempt and are generally unwilling to learn anything about other cultures, including other languages. Now, we will see through our background, we will pick the sage background. So our man here is a little bit different. He kind of actually likes to learn about different cultures a little bit. Here, he's more prone to magic, so he uses magic, so he wants to learn. He has traveled. And so he will have a little bit more curiosity, which to me helps roleplay and explain why we go into more dialogue than Lae'zel would, right? Because Lae'zel seems to just kind of cut everyone off, right, at the start of their conversation and just wants to chop their head off. And this is why they will form this nice little duo with Lae'zel as more of a supporting character, but we will focus on her arc as well. So they're mostly, our character will take the lead in dialogues. They view material plane dwellers as ignorant and incompetent, or in worse cases, as potential slaves. They could only bring themselves to use magic items not of Githyanki design if they were extremely powerful, and even then, by rationalizing that any such items must have been designed with Githyanki knowledge to begin with. It is uncommon, but not impossible for a Githyanki to overcome the prejudices of its people and start regarding others with respect. So there you go. That's kind of the roughly how they see the world. Now let's quickly go into a little bit about their combat, a little bit more here. Now again, helps to explain some of the, I guess, the references Lae'zel makes early on in the game as well. Now, in accordance with their culture of combat, the Githyanki are merciless warriors. They excel at blending their psionic abilities with their combat skills in an effective and deadly combination. Typically, Githyanki warriors, sometimes referred to as Gith warriors, have the ability to reproduce effects such as Mage Hand, Jump, Misty Step, right, which we have all in BG3. But some can also have more, while the more powerful knights, it says here, are also capable of plane shifting and telekinesis. Now, our guy, again, we'll see when we create the character in a second. I'll explain a little bit the backstory to Eldritch Knight and how I see it, Githyanki, Eldritch Knight. He is precisely that sort of knight character that blends a bit more of psionic together with, just combat skills, whereas Lae'zel is a sort of pure combat, just kind of, sword wielding, kind of jumping around, kind of athletic, battle master, which is what she will be. Now, Githyanki military hierarchy is divided into companies of 10 warriors, each led by a Sarth. Each group of 10 Sarths is in turn supervised by a Kithrak. So this is who Kithraks are. And every group of 10 Kithraks, so i.e. 100 warriors, right? So 10 Sarths and then 10 Kithraks, are led by a supreme commander. At the top of the hierarchy is the leader of all Githyanki, Vlaakith. Knights are among the most influential Githyanki and stand outside the military hierarchy. Their deadliest weapons and a signature of Githyanki culture are silver swords. They are wielded by every knight. Silver swords damage their opponents' minds as well as their bodies, and in the astral plane are capable of severing the silver cord that connects the soul of a traveler using the astral projection spell to their body in the material plane. These weapons are treasured by all Githyanki, and they relentlessly pursue any outsider who wields them. Githyanki who own their psionic skills as well as combat are known as Gish. They are typically employed as assassins and spies and are capable of casting spells such as Fireball, Magic Missile, Counterspell, and Haste, among others. So there is a little bit of scope. Now, I don't like going out on these sort of very rare characters. Now, there is, I think, scope to make a Githyanki assassin. There is a little bit of a scope, maybe. I don't think Wizard would really work, but I definitely have another Githyanki sort of knight in mind, and if we fail this playthrough, we'll try that again. I do think Eldritch Knight works a little bit better it works a bit better in terms of, probability that we will actually complete this honor mode playthrough. But the other option I have, which I'm going to keep secret for now, but I think it's a really interesting one, and thematically, and it just plays really in a really cool way. So if we die, I will start over with that playthrough with a little bit of kind of a twist on the Githyanki and a bit of a rare character. This character, as I again already mentioned a couple of times, very similar to Lae'zel, more of like a typical Githyanki, nothing special, so to speak, because that's how, I much prefer playing just down to earth, typical characters. Now, just quickly in terms of their religion, so there is no religion in Githyanki society, right? Their culture is too strongly based on individuality for any organized religion to thrive. Moreover, as a civilization that built its cities on top of corpses of deities, this is where Tunarath, their main city, is built, they have difficulty in recognizing divinity. However, they do revere Vlaakith, almost to the level of religious worship, and the Lich Queen herself destroys any Githyanki who start following another deity. For that reason, Githyanki clerics exist, but they are extremely rare and have to live in hiding. I guess unless you worship Vlaakith, maybe you're a little bit more accepted. Now, the closest Githyanki have to religious figures are knights, whose devotion to Vlaakith is compatible to that of paladins, even granting them a few powers similar to those of a paladin, such as detect good, cause disease, and protection from good and evil. Since Vlaakith is not a true deity, however, they do not receive spells or powers against undead. So there is some scope. I also experimented with a little bit playing a Vengeance Paladin with a Githyanki. Pretty cool, kind of, and focusing on the psionics, I think, Wrath Smite, which does psionic damage. I think it's a little bit, but it's not a perfect fit. Now, last bit here now. The central aspect of Githyanki society is its culture of plunder. Their ultimate goal under Vlaakith is to treat all other worlds of the material plane as the Githyanki gardens, which they can loot at will and bring the spoils to their home in the astral plane, so that they never have to worry about food, water, and other concerns that are considered beneath them. The second goal is to root out and destroy as many illicit colonies as they can find. So illicit hunting parties are common. Since mind flayers are usually well hidden, Githyanki warriors in the material plane are in a state of constant readiness for combat. So there we are. I think that's pretty much it. Now, in terms of, I think, what else is there? We haven't mentioned. In terms of cities, you know, they basically have dispersed themselves mostly, and they live in these little astral sort of communities, right? In the time, here it is actually. In the timeless astral plane, the Githyanki inhabit numerous fortresses constructed from materials imported into the plane, as well as cities built upon god isles, the corpses of dead deities that could be found throughout the astral plane. Their largest residences are massive, lavishly decorated castles that, owing to the xenophobic nature of the Githyanki, are usually avoided by other creatures in the astral plane. These fortresses are sometimes as large as cities and the centers of Githyanki commerce and manufacturing. The Githyanki capital and largest city, Tunarath, is built on the corpse of a deceased power known only as the One in the Void. The most important commercial city is Githmir, also the most cosmopolitan of Githyanki communities. Apparently, another interesting bit I found, Githyanki are the only race that is or one of two races that is not welcome in Menzoberranzan, the Drow capital. So they do have a bit of antagonism with the Drow as well. Now, with all of that said, I hope that gave you a little bit of an insight into who the Githyanki are, and why the game kind of starts off as them. Very, very interesting, I think. Once I learned all of that, I thought, wow, okay, they're pretty cool. If you want, like, summarize it in 2 words, they're basically like the Jedi of D&D. So with that, let's go ahead, DC. This is why you get astral knowledge, right? A class action that we can use every day, and it lasts until long rest, and gives us proficiency in all skills of a chosen ability. Now, it actually took me a while to figure out what proficiency is, and proficiency is basically a bonus that you get to a few things in terms, both like ability checks, some saving throws, and some weapons and items you can use, and it's simply a +2. Now, I finally figured out why is it +2. It's +2 simply because you're level, I think, 1 to 4, it's +2. Then 5 to 8 or 5 to 9, it's +3. And then at later levels, something like 8 to 12 or 9 to 12, it's +4. And it's just that. There's nothing you can do to affect it. It's just +2, +3, and then +4. So you kind of grow more and more powerful as you level. And for example, if you have a proficiency in certain weapon, what that means is you get sort of +2 at the start of the game to hit in attack rolls with that weapon. I actually can't remember now if that adds to the damage. I think it's only to the attack roll. Right? Whereas if you don't have proficiency, you can still use the weapon, you just lose that +2. Similarly, proficiencies in something, when you pick in something like, persuasion or perception, that's also proficiency, right? So that gives you a few points in. What this astral knowledge, I guess, class action does is I normally cast it on wisdom, and that gives me a +2 to all wisdom checks. So for example, wisdom is persuasion, I think investigation, intimidation. I think intimidation is charisma, rather, sorry, but wisdom is sort of perception, and a few others, we'll see. So really useful. Useful for sort of an honor mode duo playthrough as well. Very, 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 very nice. We get a cantrip, Githyanki Psionics, Mage Hand. Create an invisible spectral hand that can manipulate and interact with objects. Now this only lasts for 10 turns, unlike, a permanent, for example, Mage Hand for the Arcane Trickster. Not a lot of uses for this, but it can distract enemies, it can shove, it can pull some levers and operate some machinery for us. So pretty cool for level 1. Not great amount of use, but good to have. In terms of racial features, we move 9 meters per turn, kind of average for pretty much in line with everyone else. I think Wood Elves, are the fastest at 10.5 meters, and I think the Dwarves are 7.5 meters. And then we get sort of one race abilities, this Martial Prodigy. A lifetime of relentless training gave you armor proficiency with light and medium armor, as well as proficiency with short sword, long sword, and great sword. All great proficiencies, great to have medium armor, although, I mean, as a fighter, we actually have heavy armor and shields straight away as well. And we get long swords, short swords, great to, I believe, under martial weapons anyway. But I still like this, because the reason I like this, kind of gives you a direction for your character. But again, I don't think, I feel like I stick more with the martial prodigy, which is that, they're very, they're more melee characters. They don't like shooting bows. They're much more predisposed to melee. They are masters of various weapons. Now, I think there is a preference for longsword, greatsword. We'll see how we kind of fare. But I think Githyanki would generally kind of use whatever weapon they're best with, as long as they, if they train long enough with it and they're good enough with it, all the other Githyanki won't mind and will sort of respect them for it. It's the mastery of the weapon that's more important to them, I think, it seems to me, than sticking with swords, right? Now, that's it for the race, right? And no other sub-races, just the Githyanki. I kind of wish they put the Githzera in here, maybe, but I guess it didn't really fit the narrative. And I think that Baldur's Gate 3 wanted to focus on the Githyanki. Now, in terms of our class, we'll go fighter. Like I mentioned, there are a few options, but our fighter, I really like it, and it fits the honor mode, fits the playthrough, fits our relationship with Lizelle. She respects strength and sort of mastery of combat, being a battle master herself, and so we are likewise a fighter. I also wanted to, give this playthrough a bit of a different flavor, a bit of a different twist from our other, as I mentioned, ongoing playthrough of rogues, where we're constantly kind of hiding and doing sneak attacks from range. I think a lot of honor mode playthroughs generally focus on spells and range, so I wanted to do something different again and just go full melee. We go into a conversation, we say something curt, aggressive, we get ourselves into a fight, and then we just fight ourselves out of that situation as two battle masters, sort of like Githyanki. I think that would be pretty cool. But let's read the description here. Fighters have mastered the art of combat, wielding weapons with unmatched skill and wearing armor like a second skin. I mean, that fits Githyanki perfectly, right? Another thing I didn't mention actually when I was reading the lore, is something like all Githyanki train as warriors. About 80% of them are pure warriors. They do have two other castes. Forgot their names. I think Mlar are sort of like wizards they're like engineers who construct the castles and sort of take care of the logistics, I think, of like, their outposts and whatnot. Sort of like there. So they're a bit like traders, engineers, generally kind of those type of guys. And there is also another caste that are sort of farmers, I think, and craftsmen, I think, something like that. So they have two other castes. About 80% of Githyanki are pure warriors. So again, very fitting, very simple. Again, our man is not some special Githyanki, but just a normal Githyanki. Now, in terms of the fighting style, adopt a particular style of fighting as your specialty. Now, we will go with defense. We gain a +1 to armor class while wearing armor. This is because we're all sort of like kind of agile. You see, they're not particularly bulky. We're kind of agile, kind of ducking and weaving, kind of fighter. So I think that fits perfectly. Also, obviously, we're playing on honor mode, so any defense we get is highly appreciated, to survive the first few levels, but also in general throughout the game. If you think about the way I think of bonuses in general, right? Because there's actually scope to pick dueling. I think there is scope to pick great weapon fighting for sure. Protection, I kind of feel not so much. I feel like Githyanki are a little bit too aggressive for this, but they will use shields. I think we might very well use a shield. Two weapon fighting, I think, also possible. So all of these are possible. The reason I like defense, again, it's honor mode. So we're kind of thinking what is the most useful as well as thematically kind of coherent. I explained why it's thematically coherent because we're very agile. We're kind of masters of ducking and weaving and jumping, doing all sorts of acrobatics during combat. That's how I see it in my imagination. But also, +1 armor class gets used practically. I mean, every turn of combat, the enemies will take. They will roll a hit, right? They will try to hit you practically every time. There's, not many enemies that even spend one turn just like buffing themselves or something, right? They very often. So this gets used from the start of the game, throughout the game, always has equal value, always has equal usefulness, right? And the beginning of the game. So super, super useful. And so that's why, for honor mode, I feel like this is a great pick for a fighter, for a melee fighter. If you think about something like, I think great weapon fighting, for example, right? When you roll a 1 or a 2 on a damage die for an attack with a two-handed melee weapon, that die is rerolled. Now, I don't like to pigeonhole myself into two-handed weapons necessarily. I don't think that is, it's clearly, I think Githyanki have a preference for it, but that's not necessarily what we want to go with. We want to have some versatility. Also, when you roll a 1 or a 2, that's when you make an attack roll. Now, with the fighter, you have one action to start, but you quickly obviously gain another action, and you will gain extra attacks later. But still, like, you only do this like a few times a turn, so it does grow in usefulness, because, at the end, you could do you do at least, what, 3 attacks per turn, right? With Action Surge, you can do 6 attacks, right? And with something like, Potion of Speed, you can do like 9 attacks. That's at the end of the game. For the first, even like third half of the game, you only use this like once in every fight. And even then, you only actually use it when you roll a 1 or a 2, which is a 10% chance, right? Oh, sorry, not 10%. So it's a 1d8 roll. So it's more like, let's say, 1d8 or 1d10 for a two-handed. You're only going to 1 or 2 or 10% of the time. Yeah, sorry, I was right. Yeah, if you hold the weapon in one hand, I guess it's 1d8. So you will roll that 25% of the time. Well, then you wouldn't be using great weapon fighting, sorry. So great weapons damage 1d10 roll, I think, right? So 10% chance. So you will use it 10% of the time. I mean, obviously more damage is nice, but I'd rather stay alive and do more attacks and hit people for longer. Even 1 or 2 extra hits and not dead while you're not dead, I think compensates for this. So a lot of people kind of love this. I kind of feel defense is superior, personally. But let me know what you think down in the comments in case I'm getting anything wrong. Now, in terms of background here, we're gonna go with the Sage. You're curious and well-read, with an unending thirst for knowledge. Learning about rare lore of the world will inspire you to put this knowledge to greater purpose. And again, this is kind of a little bit of I think we are stepping away a little bit from the typical Githyanki, but I like to give my characters, just a little bit of a twist, right? So we are a sage, we have traveled, that's why we are older, we're not as kind of hot-headed as Lysel. We've proven ourselves a little bit, we've seen the world, and we're keen to learn more. We still think the Githyanki are superior, everyone else is basically incompetent, or, or at best a slave potential. But, we are curious. We do have maybe not quite an unending thirst for knowledge, but we are curious, and we are well-read because we're an Eldritch Knight, so we learn spells, we're more into magic, kind of studying, right? That obviously required, more than just swinging the sword. We've done a lot of that maybe in our youth, but now we're an Eldritch Knight. We got a little bit of that Arcana knowledge, right? Recognize magic, interact with enchanted items as an Eldritch Knight. We've typically done that in the past, hence we have that skill. And history, remember the past of the world and its people. Again, something like we learn as we aged, history is important. Right, so this is kind of the little twist on our character, which make us a little bit different from Lysel, but it will still complement her and the party. I think the checks are both decent, although for this part of the background, I really like to roleplay more so than pick skills that are particularly useful. And I'm perfectly fine with rolling some bad checks and dialogues and examining items. I don't mind that at all. Now let's clear away our ability points and even switch this off, and kind of talk a little bit about character. So we do have proficiency in strength. That's what I talked about a little bit. So we have +2 proficiency, right? Represents whether you are trained in a weapon type, tool, or skill. Provides a bonus to associated rolls, making you more likely to succeed. Which is great. It is +2. Why is it +2? Is because we are level 1 to 4. We're always level 1 when we start. It will then increase to +3. It will then increase to +4. I mean, I only figured this out now, when I did research for this playthrough. So for those who maybe are still confused by it, that's what it is. Now we're going to give ourselves the easy +2, right, for the strength, and we're going to maximize our strength. We're going to go with start off with 17 strength. Now, in terms of, in fact, first of all, for the rest of the attributes, I hate going below 10. I feel like our character is well balanced. I do that for all of my characters pretty much, unless there's some real reason. Now, for example, Lysel is an established kind of established, origin character. She has 8 charisma, and we'll keep it that way. because I think she really does, she's role-played that way, that she's very curt, probably even more than another Githyanki. She's super, I guess, young, kind of ambitious, eager to prove herself, hot-headed. So for her, that's fine for me. Sometimes when I play female characters, which I don't really like, you could maybe like decrease strength to 8 if you're like a, like a wood elf archer. I feel like I can roleplay. But otherwise, or maybe like a gnome or a halfling, I could roleplay, less strength. But even for a halfling, I kind of struggle. Just because you're shorter doesn't necessarily mean you're less strong. So I kind of feel, given we are, a sort of like a warrior in this world of Faerun, I don't like decreasing abilities to below 10. And that kind of provides to me an added challenge as well as to how we build characters. And in terms of dexterity, we're going to go 14. In fact, we're going to 13, and we're going to give ourselves, in fact, M+1. Doesn't really matter, but we'll spend that +1 here. Now, why? This is because, as a Githyanki, I think we will favor medium armor over heavy armor. So we do want that +2 bonus. Again, we're sort of an agile fighters. That's how I see the Githyanki. I think there is scope to be a knight Githyanki and wear heavy armor and be that paladin. I think for us, we'll probably stick with the medium armor. But, there's obviously that option. But we're kind of more of a mobile kind of deflect, parry kind of fighter rather than rely on heavy armor and just kind of boom, brute force our way. We got a bit more finesse. And not in the sense of using finesse weapons as they are defined in the game, but more of that sort of mobile, jumping around, misty-stepping type fighter. And, as Eldritch Knight as well, you'll see we have some spells, so we're kind of like, boom, we're kind of blocking, doing some psionic damage, pushing people away. We're kind of like that. So for that reason, I want Dexterity to have +2 to armor class while wearing medium armor. That sticks with us throughout the game. I also want some initiative, of course, because we do want to act first. Again, Githyanki are aggressive. I feel like that, again, fits the character. They want to take initiative, they get into combat, and they just start swinging. That's how they are. So again, love it. Thematically, also for honor mode, obviously it fits. That, we are kind of, pretty much need that to succeed. Although there is a way to play, I think, with 10 decks. In terms of Constitution, we're going to go with 14. We kind of need all the HP we can get, again, on honor mode. Thematically also, Githyanki, they are well conditioned, right? They have stamina and physical endurance. They've been training since childhood. So, 14 Constitution, definitely no less than that, I think, for sure, for Githyanki. And that's just where it's limited by point. I'd love to have 16 Constitution, obviously, but this is what we have. So overall, as you can see, we're obviously more developed kind of physically, where we got Constitution, Dexterity, and our focus is on Strength, given we're a warrior. Maybe with a two-wielded or a shield and a sword, we'll see. But, very well developed. Now, we'll be picking Eldritch Knight as a subclass, which uses Intelligence to cast. But, as you will see, Githyanki, they aren't really spell casters. They use magic, but they mostly use it to enhance their own martial abilities, right? That's where that fusion comes from, and where I think these characters are cool. So they're a bit like Jedi. They're situational. They use just the right spell, just at the right time, to defend themselves, protect themselves, or to just throw people off, or push them, or maybe do like this one really strong spell. But you'll see as we play through. I kind of have a plan, and we'll try. We'll work on our intelligence as we level up. Now, finally, in terms of our skill proficiencies, Intimidation, definitely, right? That's for our social. We'll be going with kind of Githyanki dialogue options and Intimidation wherever there is a check, because I think that's how Githyanki, they're not going to do any performances for you, that's for sure. There's no persuasion, right? They respect strength and they show strength. Deception, also not really like Githyanki. So in terms of dialogue options, we're really focusing on Intimidation. And again, I think that thematically kind of fits us, right? Now, again, survival, perception, obviously those are nice, but I think athletics, we are a warrior, we are getting conditioned. I would love to switch this to insight or survival or perception, but I feel like, thematically, immersively, I mean, it's really athletics. We're in the melee combat, so I'm gonna leave it at that. Leave it at that. It does help us resist getting shoved, I believe, right? Perform physical style helps you shove and resist being shoved. Yeah. so we don't want to be shoved ourselves. So I feel like that's thematically coherent. Now, we're almost up on the hour, which is perfect, because the only thing we have left to do before we begin our adventure is to actually, let's actually proceed and name our character, and the name I've picked is Tarquel. Let me just double check. Sorry, Talqueer is how I wrote it down. That's why I liked it. Talqueer. That will be his name, Talqueer and Lazel. I think it's got a ring to it. I don't know about you, but I kind of like that name. I found it on some random fantasy name generator. Looked for a while. Like, it's very important to me. Again, this is the type of channel this is. I like immersion. I prioritize it everywhere. Although, again, like, you know, we're not going to gimp ourselves and just kind of die over and over, right? It's immersive, but obviously playing within the constraints of the game. But yeah, heavily prioritizing immersion. Now let's go ahead and proceed. Now we will also quickly make a Githyanki guardian, of course, because who else? She'll be female. There's no need for body art, that's for sure. No piercing. Again, I'll make this really quick because I have pre-made her before. Obviously spending hours on this, but I did find like a cool combination of her. Where's the hair that I liked? Come on. Sorry guys, this is... Can I find this? Yeah, there we go. So kind of hair like that. Obviously no facial hair, all that nonsense. General, it's this face. A voice, female. In terms of skin tone, I think I wanted her to be kind of like, yeah, this is more typical Githyanki. It says that you have yellow skin. Our guy has kind of olive green, kind of yellow green. She's a bit more kind of gold, a little bit different. The maturity, she's young, fit and beautiful. Kind of unusual to have, you know, these large eyes. No body art. I don't think. Hang on. Does she have any scars? No, that's it. That's just all Githyanki. Can't escape being scarred. Fine. In terms of eyes, I kind of think it's cool if she had same eyes as us. I kind of feel... I don't actually know what the Guardian even is in the game. As again, I haven't made it past the first map that much. So if she's somehow related to us, I kind of like it to think that way. Maybe she's some sort of, I don't know, our mother that we never knew. If you kind of know The Witcher, and if you read the books, there is actually a really cool story that I like, where Witcher Geralt actually meets his mother, or he's pretty sure that that is his mother, because she kind of recognizes him. And as you know, witches are taken away from their parents, and then like subjected to all sorts of mutant trials. But anyway, I digress. That story kind of stood out to me, and I kind of thought it's loosely based on that. That, you know, maybe this Guardian is somehow actually related to our character. And hence, similar, you know, same eyes. Makeup, I think I went with this one, which I kind of liked. Again, obviously I'm a man, so not very well versed in makeup, but that will do. Red lip tint, of course. In terms of hair, okay, it's not really blonde, as Githyanki aren't really blonde. I think I went with brown, actually, forget, frankly. Maybe ginger or brown. These colors like are really weird in BJ3. I think ginger. Let's go with a kind of like brown, ginger. Yeah, I think that's fine. Black highlights. Yeah, sure. Let's have a look. No highlights. There we are. Now we're almost up on the hour, so let's go ahead and just venture forth, look through the cinematic, and we'll cut the episode here and then start again with actual gameplay in episode 2. I hope you enjoyed this, guys. If you have, give it a like to spread the first episode of the series. Let me know down in the comments if you have any suggestions. But I'm really excited for this. You know, a melee, honor mode, duo playthrough, exploring one of the companions as the Githyanki, getting ourselves into trouble, and showing the world of Faerun, you know, who's really who, right, in martial prowess. But with that said, let's go ahead and venture forth. Amazing. Now, I hope with my long explanation, or my long overview of the Githyanki lore, that opening cinematic actually made much more sense to you guys, in case you didn't already know all of that stuff. Here we are, guys, ready to start our adventure.
Finally free. I must find my kin.
Indeed, I must find my kin. Now, let's take a pause here, and I'll make a cut for episode 2, where we will, just do a quick summary of everything I talked about in episode 1, and actually begin our adventure. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you watched to the end, again, do give it a like if you just to spread the series, get more people on board. I'm really excited for it. I hope you are as well, and I'll hope to see you in episode 2. Bye for now.